Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Before we start, a reminder that this halaqah will be the last in this season or this year, and we'll give you a break over winter, right? And then inshallah we'll reconvene sometime in January. We'll make the announcement, so inshallah you will see it and you won't miss it. And if you don't receive any notification, please let me know. We can put you on reminder or remind, whatever it is, the app, so that you get the text and you are notified. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to talk about Surat al-Hujurat. And Surat al-Hujurat is a Madani surah, which means it was revealed after the migration of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to Medina. That is the definition of Madani versus Makki, which means it was revealed before the migration of the Prophet, peace be upon him, regardless of where the revelation happened. So it's not about the location, it's about the time. Anything revealed before the migration, the Hijrah, is considered Makki. Anything revealed after is considered Madani. The big difference between the Madani and the Makki focuses on issues of theology, belief, faith, right? Prophets, the story of the prophets. The Madani surahs usually focus on important rules, rulings, how to pray, how to fast, things like that. So you notice that the Madani surahs are usually longer, the verses even are longer because they have to explain certain rules and so on. And Hujurat is a good example of a Madani surah because this surah focuses on manners and etiquettes, something we might lack these days. And you're going to see that the surah is full, it's like condensed with these important manners and etiquettes. All right. So I'm going to, inshallah, start and maybe I'll go through certain sections. We may not be able to finish it. It's, like 3 pages. So we'll go and focus on certain segments of the surah. The first segment, which is like the first three verses, talks about our manners with the Prophet, peace be upon him. And you might say, well, the Prophet is not alive. Well, how can we show mannerism to the Prophet if he's not alive? And we're going to see, inshallah, that not only we should have manners to the Prophet, but also we can extend these manners to other beings around us. So the first ayah says, O you who believe, do not put yourself ahead of Allah and the Prophet. Do not put yourself ahead in front of Allah and His Prophet. It means don't put your opinion in front of the revelation. So the revelation has like a veto power over your opinion. It basically trumps your opinion. It supersedes your opinion. All right? Because some people like to, philosophize and think they're very smart, and they basically force their opinion on the revelation. So these are priorities we have to be aware of, that the revelation has a priority and supremacy, if you will, over our opinions. So that's the first rule. Very simple. Right? The second one, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي. O you who believe, do not raise your voices over the voice of the Prophet, peace be upon him. ولا تجهروا له بالقول كجهر بعضكم لبعض. And when you speak in front of him, don't raise your voices either. So if you're having a side conversation, like say 2 companions, they should not raise their voices in front of the Prophet ﷺ, out of respect. Now, how can we apply that today? Well, again, it means that we should not basically show our opinion or force our opinion or put our opinion in front of or against the tradition of the Prophet, the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him. But this is much more like comprehensive than that. And this is where, I have to mention this pretty like clearly. This idea of respect in our day and age doesn't even exist sometimes. Because we have to remember that like this idea of raising your voice. In the old days, it was very clear, for example, that you cannot raise your voice in front of your father or mother. In fact, you could risk being disciplined and even hit in some cases if you did that in some societies. Now, I'm not advocating any kind of hitting. I'm just saying that this concept even does not exist. And you see many kids, Muslim kids, I'm too close, Muslim kids, non-Muslim kids, raising their voices in front of their parents and other people. The Prophet ﷺ told us actually in a hadith, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يُوَقِّرْ كَبِيرَنَا وَيَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا. Like, he's not one of us, which means you're not a really good Muslim if you do the following. If you do not respect the person older than you, your elders, and you do not have compassion for the people younger than you. Okay? So there's two things here. You should not disrespect the people older than you. So it's not just your father or mother. Right? And part of the respect, not all of it, part of it, is that you don't shout at people older than you. And like I said, again, this time and age, this concept almost does not exist. Unless it's a person of authority that you fear or you want something from. But if it was somebody you did not really fear, did not really care for, then this concept does not exist. And you don't think it's a big deal. Now, of course, we have to draw a line between, like, I would say, extreme authority, where you cannot even, like, state your opinion. So yes, in some societies, we do see that. Like the child, or not even the child, the young person is not even allowed to say their opinion in the presence of elders. That's not good either. Even the Prophet ﷺ, like long time ago, he did allow young people to speak and to say their opinions in front of many elders. In fact, sometimes he would pick the opinion of the younger person because it was wiser, it was better. So we should have like some balance. On one hand, on one extreme, we have societies that forbid young people from speaking, even from sitting with adults. That's a bit extreme. But on the other hand, we have other cultures and societies that give youth complete freedom, even disrespecting others and speaking, screaming at certain individuals and so on. So, in Islam, we want to seek the balance, right? We want to seek the balance. We don't want to go to either extreme. And this is important because also it does play a lot later in your life. Because you're always conflicted, like you want to respect your mother and father, but again, because of certain cultures, your parents might even intervene in your personal life. Like when you're married, for example. You see some parents, they really get in between the husband and wife, and they want to know everything, and want to know your private matters. In that case, you should draw the line, but you should be respectful about it, all right? Because that's your right to privacy is important, okay? So it's really important to watch these boundaries and not go to either extreme. Respect should always be there. Respecting the elders should always be there. Sometimes, if you see that something is really intruding on your privacy or anything like that, Yes, you should face it, you should take care of it, but again, with respect. You don't have to be disrespectful when you do that. But I know these are intricate matters, and this is why we have to be aware of it. But the bottom line, the main rule here is that we respect the people above us or older than us, and we have compassion for the people younger than us. All right. So this is the second rule. The third one also very, very similar. It says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَغُضُّونَ أَصْوَاتَهُمْ عِنْدَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ امْتَحَنَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُمْ لِلتَّقْوَى. So this is now showing us the opposite, those who lower their voices in front of the Prophet, peace be upon him. These are like basically people who have gone through like a test and they have passed basically the test and they are pious, or they have piety in their hearts. Okay? Another habit that existed at that time, or at least some people did it, which was not very appropriate, was that some people, especially like maybe Bedouins or like people from the desert, they would come to the house of the Prophet and they would yell his name. Like instead of knocking and waiting for an answer, they would yell his name from above the wall. I mean, they're trying to get his attention like through the walls, right? Through all these barriers. So this is also not good either. You know, I don't know if it happens nowadays. Maybe some people do it. They might go and start shouting their friend's name in front of the house, hoping that he would come out. I mean, if you knock and no one answers, you should leave. Okay? Because some people, I mean, maybe they feel justified to do that, and they start hollering and they're, you know, yelling the name, hoping that they would, you know, shame him out or shame her out of the house. Like, you know, I heard my name now, I have to answer. So this is not appropriate, and you know, sometimes people have things to do, they're busy, and they don't want to answer you. So just be mindful of that and respect that. Not everybody wants to be with you all the time, right? Some people have other business to do, and that could be important in some cases. So we should, again, it's about the privacy. We should respect the privacy of people and not violate these things by these actions. Okay, now we're gonna jump to a different topic that's also important when it comes to manners and other things as well. So here it says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين. O you who believe, and again you see this call over and over again, O you who believe. So it's addressing people who at least claim and they acknowledge that they believe. So that is an expectation from them. That if you're a believer, you would do certain things. So it says, if someone, and fasiq is somebody who is an open sinner, but here it means someone who may not be reliable when it comes to relating news. It says, if someone like that brought some news to you, so he brought some news to you, don't believe him right away. Basically verify the news first before you believe it, before you act upon it. Because then if you don't verify, if you're not careful, you might accuse certain people wrongfully. All right? Now this has many applications today. On a small scale, it could be that somebody came to you and said, hey, your friend said this and this about you, and you fall for it. You did not check, you don't verify, you just believe it. And you start holding grudges against that person. And all because somebody just related false information. So here the ayah tells us, verify the source of information. Make sure what you believe is true. Confirm what you hear. Now this doesn't just apply to us and our friends, because today we live in a society where we receive information all the time, right? We live in an information age, right? And we have the mainstream media, now we have social media, so we're bombarded with all the all these information, all that news on a regular basis. And a lot of times we fall for it. And this ayah is telling us, don't do that. Don't be gullible. Don't be easily fooled, or don't be easily convinced by something. Do your check the sources. Make sure it is correct, and don't fall for it. And how many times we hear something on the news and then we believe it right away? And now it's not just about something local, just about a friend. We might believe certain things about certain countries. Some countries go to war because some misinformation. And I think you're aware of some of that, right? Like a whole war started because people believed in some false information. Because you want to rally all the people around you, so now you want to spread false information, and people fall for it. So that's why it is really important to verify the sources, to verify the information before you act upon it, before you believe in it. Likewise, nowadays we see social media, and it's not just that, but also the fact that it's so easy to Photoshop something, right? It's so easy to make something appear and it's not true, appear in a certain way and it's not true. You can easily take maybe 2 photos and merge them into one, making you believe that this person is doing a certain act and he's not, or she's not. And the fact that we know that, we should not fall easy for these, for these things, right? And yeah, you can glance over it, but don't believe it. I would say, in fact, doubt everything you see around you, especially social media. Especially when you have to act upon something, don't do that. Don't do it right away. At least maybe you can try and see different sources at least. Especially if they're opposite. If they're totally opposite to each other, like one is far right, one is far left, one is whatever, and they agree on something, then maybe it is correct, maybe. But we have to realize everybody has an agenda, right? And everybody has something in mind. They want to convince you for a reason. And that's why we have to be careful and not to be so gullible. So I think this verse is really, really important these days because there's so much around us, there's so much information, and we just fall victim because we don't know what is right, what is wrong, so we have to be able to tell, and we have to be careful. Okay. Another important etiquette has to do with, I would say, leadership. So here it says, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ لَوْ يُطِيعُكُمْ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ لَعَنِتُّمْ. Okay. So here it says, and know that the messenger of God lives amongst you. And again, now we're going to see how we can translate that to our time. But look what it says. It says, if he were to obey you in many matters, or if he were to obey you in every matter, then it would be very hard for you. It'll become a hardship for you. So what does that mean? Because as we know, it is us who should obey the Prophet, not the other way around. It was the companions who had to obey the Prophet, not the Prophet having to obey the people around him. So why would the ayah say, if the Prophet was to obey you, then this would bring hardship to you? This actually is really important because I would say it is something that happens to many leaders. And if you are in a leader position, or inshallah you will be in the future, you have to be careful, you have to be aware of this. See, what happens many times if you are a leader in any way, shape, or form. So you might be someone who is in charge of something. It could be, you could be teaching somebody, you could be giving a lecture, whatever. Some people will come to you and they start telling you what to say. They start telling you how to do business, how to rule, how to do certain things. Since they don't have the mic, they don't have the access, they want to use you to get their opinions spread, for example. And for weak leaders, they fall for that. They feel like in order to appease to my base, I have to listen to everybody. Whatever they tell me, I have to follow. because I don't want to lose my base. I don't want to lose my followers. And they end up being used by certain people like that. So you cannot, as a leader, you cannot come and you cannot obey everybody. You cannot listen to everybody that comes to you and do exactly what they told you to do. Now that doesn't say that you don't listen to. Obviously, you have to listen to advice. You want people to come and tell you things. You want people to come and give you certain counsel or advice. But there's a difference between that and someone who come in and telling you, I want you to do this. You are in a position of power. I know you can do this. I want you to do this for me. Or I want you to say this next time. I mean, it's happened to me sometimes that some people come to me, they give me a full lecture after the khutbah, telling me what to say in the khutbah. And I'm saying like, why don't you give the khutbah? Why do you want to use me to, spread your ideas? Again, I welcome every advice, but there's a difference between that and you can tell. I mean, it's easy to tell sometimes. If someone wants to use you to spread their opinions. And you as a leader, inshallah, in the future, you should be aware of that. And you should be careful of that. That yes, you accept all advice, but don't be used. Don't let other people use you. Okay? And this is interesting that the Quran mentions that. Like, instead of obeying the Prophet, you want now the Prophet to obey you. And imagine if the Prophet was going to obey everybody. What's going to happen? Because obviously everybody has a different opinion. Now again, the Prophet consulted with people all the time. I mean, unless it was a revelation, the Prophet would ask the opinion of the people around him. As I said, even young companion. And he taught that to the Sahaba. Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was a Khalifa, he used to consult with young people like Ibn Abbas. Right? He would seek their opinion. But that is different from someone coming and dictating to you what to do. I want you to do this for me. I want you to vote like this. Right? So I hope you see the difference. Okay. The next topic, inshallah, we'll cover maybe a couple more and then we go to the quiz, the questions and the quiz, inshallah. So the next one has to do with infighting, when there is a fight between two groups of people. So it says, and if two groups of believers fight, then try to bring peace between them, reconciliate between them, reconcile between them. And if one refuses, like if one is aggressive, right? So if two fight, that's fine. I mean, it happens all the time. You can try and stop it, you reconciliate. If one group insists, they still want to fight, they become the aggressor. Okay, so as soon as they refuse the call to peace, the reconciliation, they become the aggressor and now you have to fight them. And that's an important rule. I don't know how you can apply it nowadays. I mean, maybe on an individual basis, if two are fighting, you come and stop them. But if someone is still attacking, then he becomes the aggressor and you should now stop him. So maybe that's a simplified way of understanding this. But it's interesting, the Quran called them baghat or baghi, which means they become the aggressor. And that's really the important rule here. That even if they were if they were not the aggressor in the beginning, the fact that they insist on the fight, they become the aggressor at that point. Okay. All right, so that's that. And then right next to or right after it, there is also this call to brotherhood. And we know in Islam, Muslims are brothers, right? And sisters. And this is the one ayah in the Quran that actually tells us that explicitly, right? If you ask what is the evidence, what is the proof of brotherhood in Islam, this is the ayah. It's ayah number 10 in Surat al-Hujurat. It says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةً. Indeed, the believers are brothers. Okay? So this establishes the fact that we have a very special, unique relationship between Muslims. Of course, it does not mean that you cannot have friends from outside. It just means that there is a special relationship between us, and that's because of this belief, right? So this belief has this element of brotherhood. So This is above and beyond friendship, because a brother is closer to you than a friend. Okay. And maybe I'll cover one more ayah. And this ayah actually has lots of manners as well. So this one is also really important. So it says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, again calling the believers, لَا يَسْخَرْ قَوْمٌ مِّنْ قَوْمٍ عَسَىٰ أَنْ يَكُونُوا خَيْرًا مِّنْهُمْ. So it says, no people, because qawm is like a group of people, it's like an entire ethnicity. That's a qawm. Okay? So it says, a people should not make fun of other people. And this is interesting. It's not talking about the individuals, because also for individuals, we're supposed to mock each other. But here is more to it than just mocking someone. It's really about you mocking an entire race, an entire ethnicity. And that obviously speaks about racism or xenophobia or anything like that, where you have a problem with a whole group of people. So it's not because maybe he mistreated you. It's much more than that. Like you're unhappy, you have a problem with an entire race. Or you have a problem of, because of certain color or place of origin or country. All right? So you should not mock an entire population, right? Because of a certain feature they have. Really important. Because again, if you are very, if we are very honest, we do see that among Muslims sometimes. Right? Maybe an Arab mocking a non-Arab sometimes. And what is important is that does not make you better in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Just because you speak a certain language doesn't mean anything. And look what the Quran says. Like one reason you should not do it, because you shouldn't do it, right, at all. But there is a reason also. There's one reason you shouldn't do it. And it says, عَسَىٰ أَنْ يَكُونُوا خَيْرًا مِّنْهُمْ. Don't mock a certain people because they could be better than you. Again, let me, because I'm an Arab, I can do that, right? So let's say an Arab might say, I'm better than others because I speak Arabic and I read the Quran. I don't make any mistakes. I don't have an accent when I recite the Quran. And hence my superiority. Quran says, maybe these people you're mocking or making fun of or ridiculing, maybe they are better than you in the eyes of Allah. How do you know? I mean, reciting better does not make you better in the eyes of Allah. Having a better recitation or a better voice or better pronunciation does not make you better in the eyes of Allah. Okay? That is not a criteria in Islam. And a lot of times it was not even your doing. It was the fact that you were born in a particular family, in a particular country. So it was not your doing anyways. So that's really important to pay attention to. One reason we don't make fun of others is because when you make fun of somebody, it's like your assumption you're better. And the Quran is saying don't make that assumption. You might have a certain criteria in your mind, but it's not a criteria. They could be better than you. So don't make that mistake. But mocking is bad in general. Like I cannot think of a single case. Like even if somebody is mocking you, you should not mock them. This is one thing you should not do. And there is an interesting verse in the Quran. It's actually a conversation between Musa alayhi salam and his people. When Musa asked his people to slaughter a cow, if you remember in the story of the cow, so he said, if you want to find your killer, because there was a murder and they want to solve the murder, and there was a revelation that says, in order to do that, you have to slaughter a cow. And initially, the followers of Musa thought that Musa was like not taking them seriously. Because what is the connection between slaughtering a cow and solving a murder, right? So they asked the question, أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا? Are you mocking us, or are you not taking us seriously? Are you taking light of us or making light of us? أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا? What Musa said, قال أعوذ بالله أن أكون من الجاهلين. I seek refuge in Allah from being an ignorant, because mocking someone is a sign of ignorance. So Musa would never accept it, that someone is accusing him of mockery. Musa would never mock anyone, would not make light of anyone, and if he did, it would have been a sign of ignorance. So it is clear in the Quran that mockery should never happen. If somebody is mocking you, just leave. You don't have to mock them back. Don't feel the necessity. If somebody is mocking Islam or the religion of Islam, you don't have to mock their religion. Because some Muslims think that they should. No, you shouldn't. Just leave. These people are ignorant. Quran told us, leave them alone. Don't talk to them. Don't engage them. You don't gain anything. They'll get worse and worse. When you engage with them, they like that. They want the engagement. They want the attention. Don't give it to them. Okay, so this is about mockery. And then, وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, don't belittle each other. Lamz is when you make a movement, a certain movement, and you make a certain statement to belittle someone. Sometimes it is implicit, indirect. It's still wrong. Even if you make a movement with the eye, like look at these people, you blink your eye or something like that. Any movement like that, any gesture that belittles someone is not allowed. And you can see how Islam is careful about these things, because a lot of times these grudges we have against certain people is because of what happens, is because of these things. And finally, the last one I'll cover, وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ. Don't call each other's names, especially if they don't like it. It happens all the time. Somebody is short, what do we call them? Shorty, midget. This is تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ, especially if they don't like it. Quran says don't do it, it's haram. And you might think it's funny, not here, I'm saying when somebody does it, but they don't think it's funny, right? Even if they smile, you might say, well, but they smile when I say it. Well, you don't know why they're smiling. Maybe they're avoiding further bullying from you, right? Maybe they just want to save themselves, right, from further abuse. So yes, don't call each other names, the Quran says. Even the Quran, imagine, I want you to imagine for a second, this is a revelation from God, and it mentions these little details. There's no other revelation, no other religion that pays attention to detail like that. Yet we see many Muslims violate that and don't pay attention to it. You go to Muslim schools and it's full of that, unfortunately. So don't call each other's names. بِئْسَ الْإِسْمُ الْفُسُوقُ بَعْدَ الْإِيمَانِ. This is actually, the Quran tells you that it is fisq, which means it's a form of a sin. Right? So, again, the surah is full of these etiquettes, and we only covered a few. We covered actually a good number. There's also more talk about thinking ill of others, these doubts about others that have no substance, no foundation whatsoever. Also it forbids us from spying on each other, from backbiting. So all of that is covered in the surah. But I think we covered enough, and hopefully you got an idea. I do notice a lot of times these days that we see many Muslims, even those who learn Islam and learn the religion, and they might know a lot about how to pray, how to fast, they don't pay attention to these etiquettes and these manners. And this is not good. We need to have the balance between knowledge and manners. Okay? So I will stop here. Have any questions? Inshallah, we can take them up. Anything? All clear? Oh yeah, of course. When we say believers are brothers, obviously it means both brothers and sisters, right? And it is basically understood in the language, especially in the Arabic language, that if you use it doesn't have to use the feminine pronoun in order to include women. So it's understood when there's a plural, includes everybody, men and women. Okay, so this is kind of implicit. So of course we have sisterhood in Islam, just like we have brotherhood in Islam. Yeah, thank you.
Like Spanish, they say amigos, but you say that for
For both, right? Is there an amiga for a female?
You can say that.
Okay, but they say amigos. Okay. I don't know about English. English, you have.
You guys.
You guys, right? Thank you. You saved me.
You say lads, laddies.
But see, guys, it's like it's slang. It's not like slang. It's not formal. Can you think of an example in formal English?
Boys, gals.
Guys and gals. No, still informal. Still slang. But it's true, actually. You see that nowadays. Especially like the new generation, like among girls, they call themselves dudes, and stuff like that. So, bro, even that's true. Actually, that is true.
When the Muslim groups were fighting, was there like was that revealed because there was a Muslim two groups fighting, and then Allah revealed that ayah, or was that just speaking kind of generally for?
It's a good question. And the question was the verse that talks about Muslims fighting. Was there an actual fighting at the time, or was this a general verse? Well, obviously at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there was no fight like that between two groups of Muslims. And of course, some of that happened after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, so that would have been after the revelation of this verse. But you could probably say that it was revealed for those times that came a bit later. So obviously, this is also, in a way, a miracle in the sense that it kind of predicted that was going to happen, and it did happen. Obviously, in the hadith of the Prophet, there's much more, mention of those fights that would come in. And what is important here is that these verses were applied at the time. All right? And we know, later, especially at the time of Ali and Muawiyah, there were many attempts to reconcile between them. And in fact, the best example, the greatest example of that was Al-Hasan, radiallahu anhu, who was the son of Ali, and his basically stepping down, because he was a Khalifa, and a lot of Muslims don't know that. He was a Khalifa for a short period of time. Less than a year, I think, right? So he was a Khalifa immediately after his father, Ali. When Ali was killed, was assassinated, Al-Hasan became the Khalifa. And he was a Khalifa maybe for 6 months, if I remember correctly. And he took a decision to step down in order to reconcile between his camp or his father's camp and the other camp, the Syrian camp, because Muawiyah was in Syria at the time. And the Prophet actually predicted that, and he said, in fact, one time he was pointing at Al-Hasan. So the Prophet ﷺ was alive, right? And he was looking at Al-Hasan when he still was a boy, and he said, "Inna ibni hadha sayyid, wa sayuslihu Allahu bihi bayna ta'ifatayni 'azimatayni min al-muslimin." He said, this son of mine, because he was the son of Fatima, his grandson, right? But he said, this son of mine is like a master, sayyid, like somebody very noble and respectful, sayyid. And he be the reason for the reconciliation between two major parties of my ummah. So yeah, and so he's a great, actually a great example of these ayat, how you can reconcile between two parties fighting. Anything else? No questions. All right, well, then we can start.